When I saw her name appear on his phone, just one soft buzz on the kitchen counter, my hand froze midair, the dish towel dripping water onto the tiled floor. It wasn't the name itself that caught me. It was the heart beside it. A small, stupid red heart. His phone never had hearts. Not for me. Not for anyone. That was the night something inside me quietly shifted. It didn't break, not yet. It just tilted. Like a glass on the edge of a table, still upright, but one small nudge away from falling. Before that moment, our life had seemed ordinary, peaceful even. My husband Daniel and I had been married for 13 years. We weren't perfect, but we were steady. We had our routines, Sunday breakfast at the corner cafe, his habit of leaving socks by the couch, my way of humming when I cooked. He worked as a financial consultant. Sharp suits, long hours, a voice that could convince anyone that everything was fine. I worked part-time at a local library. My days were filled with the soft rustle of pages, the smell of coffee, and the quiet comfort of stories. We had one daughter, Lily. She was 10 then, with my eyes and his stubbornness. She adored her father. He was the one who made her pancakes shaped like hearts, who tucked her in with silly voices. And I adored him too. Or maybe, I adored who I believed he still was. That evening after I saw that name, Sophie Sparkling Heart, I didn't confront him. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I lied. When he came into the kitchen and saw the phone in my hand, I smiled, too sweetly. "Your phone buzzed," I said lightly. "Thought it might be work." He reached for it, a bit too quickly. His eyes flickered for just a second, a hesitation, a crack, before he smiled back. "Thanks, love. Just a client." A client with a heart. That night, as we lay in bed, I watched the soft glow of his screen beneath the covers. His thumb moved fast. His face turned slightly away. And I felt something I'd never felt before in our marriage. Not anger, not yet, but distance. A cold, slow distance, growing in the dark space between us. In the mornings, he'd leave earlier than usual. "Meetings," he'd say, pressing a hurried kiss to my cheek that didn't quite land. In the evenings, he'd come home smelling faintly of something. Not perfume exactly, but the lingering sweetness of someone else's presence. I began noticing little things. The way his shirts were freshly pressed even though I hadn't done laundry that day. The way he hummed unfamiliar tunes under his breath. The sudden brightness in his tone when his phone rang, and he stepped into the hall. Still I said nothing. Because silence, I learned, can be its own kind of power. Weeks passed, and one afternoon, while clearing out the living room drawers, I found a small, folded note. It wasn't hidden well, just tucked beneath an envelope of receipts. On it, in delicate handwriting, were the words, "You make me feel like I'm not invisible anymore. S." I sat there for a long time, staring at that paper. Invisible. That word hit me harder than anything else. Because that was exactly how I had started to feel. Like furniture in my own home, like a backdrop to someone else's life. But instead of breaking down, I did something unexpected. Even to myself. I forgave him. Not because he deserved it. But because I refused to let his betrayal define me. Forgiveness, though, it doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing your battleground. The next day while Daniel was at work, I searched that name, Sophie Lang. The Heart Girl. It didn't take long. Her profile was public. All smiles and sunsets. Her captions filled with words like healing and hope. She couldn't have been more than 30. I was 42. She worked at a local art studio, taught weekend pottery classes, and posted photos of wildflowers in mason jars. There was a gentleness to her face. The kind that people like my husband would mistake for weakness. And so I made a decision. I would meet her. Not as the wife. Not with rage or accusation. But as someone else entirely. 2 weeks later, I signed up for her pottery class. Under a different last name. When she greeted me at the door, her smile was warm and real. "I'm Sophie," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You must be Claire." "Yes," I said softly. "Claire." Her studio smelled of clay and lavender. Sunlight poured through tall windows, catching dust in the air like gold flecks. She laughed easily, spoke gently. If I hadn't known who she was, I might have liked her immediately. During that first class, As I shaped the clay between my palms, I kept sneaking glances at her. At how she smiled at her phone during breaks. At how she looked at every man who walked by the window, just a quick, hopeful flicker of eyes. And I realized something that unsettled me. She wasn't the villain of my story. She was just another woman searching for love in the wrong place. Over the next few weeks, I attended every class. We began to talk about books, about childhoods, about heartbreak. She told me she'd once been engaged, but it ended when she found out he'd cheated. I listened quietly, my fingers pressing into the soft clay. One afternoon, she sighed. I met someone new. He's married, but it's complicated. My stomach tightened, but my face stayed calm. Oh, I asked softly. She nodded, her voice low. He says his marriage is over. That he stays for his daughter. Her eyes glowed when she said it. He's different. Kind. He listens. Kind. That word burned like a silent flame inside me. Because Daniel was kind, once. But kindness without honesty is just manipulation in disguise. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. Not to destroy her. Not to destroy him. But to let truth destroy itself. Naturally, inevitably. After that conversation, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed beside Daniel, listening to his even breathing, pretending not to notice how he turned away in his sleep, how his hand, once instinctively resting over mine, stayed tucked beneath his pillow. I could almost picture her face in the dark, smiling into her phone as he sent her the same lies he once told me. I'm trapped. I'll leave soon. You're the only one who understands me. Men recycle words the way they recycle promises. The next morning, I brewed his coffee, black 2 sugars, and watched as he scrolled through his phone with that same faint smile. Big day. I asked casually. He looked up, startled for a split second, then nodded. Yeah. Presentation at noon. Might grab lunch with a client after. A client. Always a client. I kissed him goodbye like always, then watched from the window as he drove off, not toward the office but down the opposite street. My chest tightened, but not from heartbreak. From confirmation. That afternoon, at Sophie's studio, I was ready. I arrived early, pretending to browse the pottery shelves. The scent of clay mixed with fresh paint. The world felt almost peaceful, until the doorbell chimed. When I turned, Daniel stood there. In his blue shirt, the one I'd ironed that morning. He froze when he saw me, but I quickly turned my back, pretending to adjust a vase. My heart hammered so loudly I thought it might give me away. Hey, you came. Sophie's voice brightened as she walked up to him. She glanced my way and smiled politely, unaware. This is one of my students, Claire. Daniel's expression twitched for the smallest moment, confusion, recognition flickering behind his polite smile. But I didn't let my eyes meet his. Nice to meet you, he said, his tone tight. I murmured back, you too. My hands were steady. My heart was not. He lingered only 10 minutes before excusing himself, muttering something about meetings. Sophie waved at him as he left, her face glowing with the soft foolishness of someone in love. And me? I stood there, molding clay that looked more like shattered stone. Over the next month, I became part of Sophie's little world. She talked about him often, about his humor, his tenderness, how he made her feel safe. And I listened, like a friend would. But I also learned her fears, the childhood she'd survived, the loneliness she carried, the way she apologized too quickly for things that weren't her fault. She wasn't cruel. She was lonely. And that made me angrier at him than I'd ever been before. Because he wasn't just betraying me anymore. He was breaking someone else. Someone already fragile. One evening I asked her, "Do you trust him?" She smiled faintly. More than I should. I nodded, pretending to shape the rim of a bowl. "And does he trust you?" She hesitated. "He says he does. But sometimes I feel like he hides me. Like he's ashamed of me." Her voice cracked just slightly. That was when I saw it. The first tiny crack in her illusion. So I pressed gently. Maybe he's not ready. Or maybe he's never planning to be. She frowned, confused. "Why would you say that?" I shrugged. "Because some men don't leave. They just visit." The words hung between us like smoke. She laughed nervously, brushing it off, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine after that. "At home. Daniel started to notice my calm. I didn't cry, didn't accuse, didn't shout. I made dinner, cleaned the kitchen, helped Lily with homework. I even smiled when he walked in late. That unsettled him more than any fight would have. One night he finally asked, "Are you okay?" I looked up from my book, meeting his eyes for the first time in weeks. "Yes," I said simply. "I'm perfectly fine." And in that moment, I think he realized he'd lost something he couldn't name. 2 weeks later, Sophie called me, her voice trembling. "He canceled our weekend trip," she said. "Said his wife's family came to town last minute." I held my breath. "Oh," she sniffled. "He promised he'd make it up to me, but I think he's lying." He sounded different. I stayed silent. Because the truth is, his wife's family hadn't come to town. It was just me and Lily, making pancakes like we always did. That was when the plan began to form. Not revenge, exactly. Something quieter. Something more poetic. The next time I saw her, I brought her a small gift. A delicate notebook with a soft blue cover. "What's this?" she asked. "For your thoughts," I said. "Sometimes, writing helps when the heart's confused." She smiled gratefully, unaware that I'd just handed her the very thing that would later expose him. Because I knew her type, she'd write everything. And Daniel, careless as he was, would eventually leave something behind. Sure enough, a month later, I found her handwriting again. This time, not on a folded note but on a forgotten page that slipped from his jacket pocket. It read, "He said he dreamed of introducing me to his daughter one day. Said she'd love me." I almost believe him. I stared at those words for a long time, then folded them neatly and placed them on his pillow. When he came home that night, he froze. "What's this?" I looked at him calmly. "You tell me." His face drained of color. "Where did you?" "I found it," I said softly. "And before you lie, remember you left it here." He sank into the chair, rubbing his temples. "I made a mistake." I almost laughed. "Which one? The affair? The lies? Or the fact that you couldn't even keep your guilt hidden properly?" His eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, fear. Not of me, but of what he'd done to himself. I stood up. "You don't need to apologize. Not to me." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I forgave you," I said. "A long time ago. You just don't know what forgiveness costs yet." And then I left the room. Because forgiveness, I'd learned, is not kindness. It's strategy. After that night, the silence in our home changed. It wasn't angry anymore. It was watchful. Daniel tiptoed around me like a man walking through his own graveyard, terrified of what he might step on. He still left early and came home late, but now his guilt clung to him like a second skin. I could feel it in the way he avoided my eyes, the way he hesitated before speaking Lily's name, as though he feared I'd hear his lies echo through her innocence. And I said nothing. Silence became my mirror, reflecting his own unease back at him. Meanwhile, I kept attending Sophie's classes. I told myself I'd stop soon. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe compassion, wouldn't let go just yet. She looked thinner, paler. The sparkle in her voice had dimmed. One evening, as we sat side by side shaping clay, she sighed. "You ever love someone you know you shouldn't?" Ich glänzte her. "Yes." "Did you stop?" I hesitated, my hands still on the clay. "Eventually." "How?" she whispered. "By remembering who I was before him." She went quiet after that. It wasn't advice she'd expected, but it was the truth. A few days later, Daniel tried again, small gestures at first. He brought me flowers, the kind he used to when we first dated. He suggested a family dinner at the same restaurant where he once proposed. I went along, smiling politely, letting him believe things were returning to normal. But I could see the cracks widening inside him, the guilt gnawing at his edges. He wasn't sleeping. He'd stare at nothing for minutes, lost in thought, his fingers trembling slightly when he reached for his glass. That was my quiet victory. I didn't need to ruin him. He was already doing it himself. 2 weeks later, Sophie called. Her voice was hollow. He ended it. I took a deep breath, steadying my tone. "I'm sorry." She laughed bitterly. "He said he loves me, but can't leave his daughter. That he needs to do the right thing." I feel so stupid. I wanted to tell her that she wasn't stupid, just deceived. But instead I let her talk. She told me how she'd waited for him on their anniversary, how he never showed up, how she finally realized she was just an emotional vacation for a man too cowardly to face his own reflection. And when she cried, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not relief, but sorrow. Because even though she was the other woman, she didn't deserve this kind of heartbreak. She was just a casualty of his weakness. That weekend, I invited her for tea. It was the first time she'd ever been to my house. I'd planned it carefully. Lily was at a friend's sleepover, and Daniel was out working. When Sophie arrived, she looked nervous, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Thank you for inviting me," she said softly. "I almost didn't come." "I'm glad you did," I replied, smiling gently. Sometimes talking helps. We sat in the kitchen, the same one where I'd first seen her name flash on his phone. For a moment I just looked at her, the softness in her face, the faint bruise of sadness under her eyes. Then I said, "Sophie, there's something I need to tell you." She looked up, confused. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "The man you were seeing, Daniel, he's my husband." Silence. Utter stillness. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked like the air had been knocked from her lungs. I continued, calm but not cruel. "I didn't come here to accuse you. I've known for a while." She shook her head slowly. "Oh my God. I didn't know. He said you were separated." "I know," I interrupted softly. "He told you what you needed to hear." Her eyes filled with tears. "I swear I didn't mean to." "I believe you," I said gently. "You weren't the one who made vows to me. He was." The tears came faster. "Why didn't you say anything sooner? Why pretend to be my friend?" "Because I wanted to understand," I said. "Not you him." And I did. She stared at me, stunned. "So what happens now?" "Now," I said quietly, "you let him face himself. And I let him see what forgiveness really feels like." She left soon after, shaken, apologetic, silent. I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, Daniel came home earlier than usual, his face pale and drawn. "She came to my office," he said, his voice trembling. "She knows everything." I kept my expression neutral. "She should." He ran a hand through his hair, panic flickering in his eyes. "You told her?" "Yes." He exhaled sharply, pacing. "Do you have any idea what that's done?" "She called me a liar in front of my team. My reputation." "Your reputation," I repeated softly, "means more to you than your family?" He stopped pacing. "That's not what I meant." "Then what do you mean, Daniel?" I asked quietly. "Because every word you've spoken these past months has meant nothing." He sat down, defeated. "I don't know how to fix this." I met his eyes. "That's because you still think it's about fixing. It's about facing." He blinked, confused. "Facing what?" "The kind of man you became when no one was watching." The room went still again. He didn't respond. And for the first time I realized I didn't need his remorse. I'd already won something far greater. Clarity. That night, as I lay in bed alone, I thought about Sophie. I imagined her deleting his messages, packing away the small gifts he'd given her. I hoped she'd move on. And I thought about Lily, still blissfully unaware, still believing her father was a hero. Maybe one day, she'd learn the truth. But not now. Not yet. For now, my job was to protect her from the version of her father that even I no longer recognized. And to protect myself, not with anger but with grace. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is peace. The days that followed felt strangely still. Daniel moved around the house like a ghost, quieter than ever. He still went to work, still pretended life was normal, but I could tell the world he'd built was collapsing, piece by piece. I didn't yell. I didn't curse him. I didn't even cry anymore. My calm unnerved him more than any fury could. He began trying harder, bringing home dinner, offering to fix things around the house that had been broken for months. He played with Lily more, as though rehearsing for redemption. But children sense things adults pretend not to. One night, after he kissed her goodnight, Lily turned to me and asked, "Mom, why does Daddy smile like he's sad?" I froze. Sometimes, I said softly, brushing her hair back. Grown-ups smile so their sadness doesn't spill on others. She frowned. That sounds heavy. It is, I whispered. That's why we forgive. Not for them, but so we can set our hearts down. She nodded thoughtfully, and for a moment, I envied her innocence. The way she still believed love could be fixed with enough bedtime stories. Sophie, meanwhile, disappeared from the studio for a while. Then one afternoon, I found a letter in my mailbox. No name, no return address, but I knew her handwriting. Inside it said, I've left the city. I'm starting over. Thank you for not hating me. You taught me what real strength looks like. I hope one day he realizes what he lost, both of us. I held that letter for a long time. She didn't owe me kindness, yet she gave it anyway. Maybe that was her way of forgiving herself. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Forgiveness doesn't make us saints. It just frees us from being prisoners. A month later, Daniel broke down. It was a Saturday morning. The sun was streaming through the kitchen window when he said, in a cracked voice, I can't live like this anymore. I looked up from my coffee. Like what? In this silence, he said. In this shame. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes wet. I know I've ruined everything. I hate what I did to you. To her. I didn't answer immediately. I wanted to see if he was confessing for my sake, or his own relief. He went on, voice trembling. When she left, I realized I'd destroyed two people who actually cared about me. And for what? For feeling wanted. I stayed quiet, letting his words echo in the air. He finally asked, Do you hate me? I looked at him. The man who'd once promised me forever, now hollowed by his own choices. No, I said softly. I don't hate you. He blinked in disbelief. Then, why do I feel like you've already left me? Because I have, I whispered. Just not in the way you think. I didn't leave our home. Not yet. Instead, I withdrew slowly, gracefully. I stopped asking where he went. Stopped waiting for him to come home. Stopped explaining my silences. He began living in a constant state of guilt, cooking breakfast, offering help, apologizing for things I'd already stopped caring about. He'd say, Can we talk? And I'd smile faintly. There's nothing left to say. Forgiveness, I learned, is not about forgetting. It's about outgrowing. And I had outgrown him. 3 months later, our anniversary came. He bought a necklace, gold, delicate, just like the one he gave me on our wedding day. He placed it on the table after dinner, his voice shaking. I know I don't deserve another chance, he said. But if you'd let me try. I cut him off gently. You already tried, Daniel. You tried being someone else, somewhere else. And it cost you everything. Tears welled in his eyes. Please don't do this. I smiled faintly. I'm not doing anything. You did. He looked at me for a long time, then whispered, You're not even angry. I was, I said. Until I realized anger was just another way of holding on to you. That's when he broke, truly broke. His face crumpled, and he began to sob. Not the performative kind, but the guttural, helpless kind. He said, I wish you'd scream at me. Hit me. Do something. I shook my head. I won't. Because then you'd think we're still the same. But we're not. He whispered, What do I do now? Live with it, I said quietly. And maybe one day learn to be better. After he left that night, for a walk that lasted hours, I sat by the window, staring at the streetlights. And for the first time in months I felt peace. Not victory. Not revenge. Just release. Because I'd finally understood what forgiveness really means. It's not saying it's okay. It's saying, I see what you did, and I'm choosing not to carry it anymore. A few weeks later, he moved into a small apartment downtown. We told Lily it was temporary, though both of us knew it wasn't. He came by on weekends, tried to be present. But guilt still clung to him like a scent he couldn't wash off. And sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch him staring at me with a strange kind of longing. Not for love, but for the peace he'd lost. That was his punishment. And I didn't have to lift a finger. In time, Sophie reached out again, a short message. I found a new job. Somewhere by the coast. I'm okay now. I replied simply, Glad. Take care of yourself. She sent a final message. I hope you're okay too. And I realized I was. Because in the quiet wreckage of everything, something unexpected had bloomed inside me. A new version of myself. Stronger. Softer. Untouchable. People think forgiveness is weakness. But it takes strength to hold your dignity when someone else loses theirs. It takes grace to walk away without turning everything into ashes. And as I stood by the window that evening, watching Lily laugh in the garden, I whispered to myself, almost as a prayer, I forgave him. And I watched him ruin her life instead. But I never let him ruin mine. Time has a strange way of healing what anger never could. Months passed quietly. The ache dulled, the house grew lighter, and little by little, laughter returned. Not the kind that fills every corner like before, but the gentle kind, the kind that comes when peace starts to settle in again. Lily and I built new routines. Saturday morning pancakes turned into Sunday morning walks. We planted roses in the garden. Red for courage, white for forgiveness. She chose the colors herself. Sometimes, she'd ask when Daddy was coming home. I never lied. I just said, he lives somewhere else now. But he still loves you. Because that part, at least, was true. One evening, while organizing old photos, I found a picture of Daniel and me from our early years. We looked so young, so certain that love alone could hold us together. I stared at that photo for a long time before placing it back in the drawer. Not out of bitterness but acceptance. There's something freeing about realizing that not every love story needs to end in ruin. Some just end. And maybe that's okay. Daniel called sometimes. He'd ask how I was doing, how Lily was. He always sounded smaller, quieter, like life had humbled him. Once he said, I keep replaying everything in my head. You her? I don't know what I was trying to find. I replied gently. Maybe you were trying to find yourself. You just looked in the wrong places. He sighed. You always knew how to make me face the truth. Then maybe it's time you start telling it to yourself, I said softly. There was a pause, then his voice cracked. Do you think you'll ever love me again? I thought about it carefully before answering. I still love the part of you that tried, I said. But I've stopped loving the part that lied. He didn't reply. But I could hear him crying quietly before the line went silent. The following week, I received an invitation. It was from Sophie. She was hosting a small exhibition in a seaside town, her first solo art show. The invitation was handwritten, simple, kind. At the bottom she'd written, You once told me to remember who I was before him. This is me remembering. I smiled. She'd made it. So I went. The gallery was small, filled with soft light and earthy tones. Her pottery pieces were raw, imperfect, beautiful. Each one shaped like a confession made solid. On one of the shelves sat a clay vase titled Grace. When she saw me, her eyes widened, then softened. You came, she said quietly. I wouldn't have missed it, I replied. For a moment we just looked at each other, two women linked by pain, standing in peace. She whispered, I still think about it sometimes. Everything that happened. So do I said. But not with anger anymore. She smiled faintly. Me neither. We hugged, brief, awkward, but sincere. And in that small, quiet embrace, I felt the last of my resentment fade away. On the drive home, the sun was setting, that soft golden kind of light that makes everything look gentler than it really is. Lily was in the back seat, humming to herself, her fingers sticky from the ice cream we'd stopped for. As we passed the old street where Daniel used to pick me up after work years ago, I caught sight of a familiar figure, him. He was standing outside a cafe, alone, holding a paper cup. He saw me too. For a second, our eyes met through the window. He didn't wave. Neither did I. But in that silent moment, something passed between us. Not love, not regret, but understanding. He had finally learned what I already knew. That sometimes, losing someone's trust is worse than losing their love. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked, Mom, are you happy now? I smiled. I think I'm getting there. She thought for a moment, then whispered, I think Daddy is sad. I nodded. Maybe. But sometimes people need to be sad to change. She yawned, her eyelids heavy. Did you change too? I brushed her hair gently. Yes, sweetheart. I changed for the better. And as I turned off the light, I realized I wasn't the same woman who once stood frozen with her husband's phone in her hand, heart pounding with betrayal. I was someone new, someone whole. Forgiveness doesn't mean we let people back into our lives. It means we stop letting them live in our pain. It's the quietest kind of freedom, the kind you earn by walking through fire and coming out clean. So yes, I forgave him, not because he asked, but because I refused to let his choices shape the rest of my story. And maybe that's the lesson I needed all along. That revenge may burn brighter, but forgiveness, in the end, burns longer. They say betrayal shatters trust, but sometimes, it also rebuilds the person you were meant to become. When I look back now, I don't see a broken marriage. I see a woman who learned to stand on her own feet. I see a mother who protected her child's peace when her own heart was in pieces. And I see a story that didn't end in anger, but in understanding. Because the truth is, not everyone who hurts you is meant to destroy you. Some are meant to reveal you. Reveal your boundaries, your worth, your strength, and the version of you that would have never existed if they hadn't walked away. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to remember this. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them your rage. You owe yourself peace. Forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It means their power over you is gone. Completely. And maybe, just maybe, that's what healing truly is. Not forgetting the past, but finally being able to look at it without bleeding. Broken heart, so tell me, my dear, would you forgive someone who betrayed you? If they finally showed true remorse? Or is forgiveness something we give only to ourselves? Tell me in the comments below, because your story might be the one someone else needs to hear tonight. Performing arts. This was They Signed Divorce Papers Behind My Back while I was in a coma. A story of betrayal, survival, and quiet redemption. And maybe, just maybe, the reminder that sometimes, the end of love isn't the end of you.